This video is a video on Western chauvinism and the hyperfocus on Shein. Our media focuses on Shein for one reason: to push the evil authoritarian regime image and conflate that single company with the People's Republic of China. The focus is to propagandize against China, not to talk about developing human rights and labor rights. Generally, you can see people are going to have a dog shit Western opinion when they use the name China versus when they use the name the People's Republic of China. And the same thing goes for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Let's look at some points. The media says nothing of the Philippines, where the $8 a day minimum wage is a direct result of being a US colony. When I was in the Philippines, I saw ads that said hiring women to work as a security guard must be 5'2" or taller, pretty, single, light-skinned, friendly, and with high school completed. I saw an ad to work as a welder for $10 a day. Now, dollars are deceptive because a Cuban earning $25 a month has more purchasing power, human rights, protections, and social programs than we do. But a tiny glimpse of the culture in the Philippines, and we see more than 10 people telling me they drink a full 2-6 of hard liquor every day, and that men are allowed to murder their wives if they cheat. But the media has no critiques of these because it is not in the ruling class's interest to attack the Philippines. In Bangladesh, factory workers got paid 17 cents an hour when they were ordered back into a factory that was crumbling. The workers refused at first, then the boss told them that they will be fired if they don't go back in and go back to work. They went back to work. The building collapsed. More than 2,000 people were injured and 1,134 people died. But does the US talk about labor rights of people in the Philippines or protections for people in Bangladesh? What about all the Latin American countries who the US has overthrown? Are there labor and living concerns about Guatemala, where the United Fruit Company overthrew the country for cheaper access to bananas so they can expropriate the so-called Global South for cheaper? Does the media talk about gig work, stripping Americans of labor rights, unions, and protections? Does the media talk about how Americans have 1/5 of all GoFundMes as healthcare fundraisers to afford the worst standard of medical care in all the rich countries? Not remotely, because it isn't in their interest. So this focus to hate China affects us directly because we waste space and time talking about what the media wants us to gossip about instead of processing our conditions collectively and addressing them. Also worth mentioning is that 1/3 of the billionaires in China are in Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong was stolen by Britain and held for 150 years, so Britain could call it a special exclusive business zone to ship opium. Now, Hong Kong is a capitalist paradise with a minimum wage of $5 an hour and capitalists given the utmost freedom to exploit. And that is where the suicide nets are. Western media blames China broadly for Western exploitation in Hong Kong. Now, I have seen it in several countries. People in NATO countries, expats, people in American colonies, and elsewhere are rewarded for hating China and propping up NATO. The billions of dollars to go towards building military bases surrounding China, Vietnam, Laos, and Korea with jets, bases, ships, and bombs is partially able to continue, specifically because people hear the name China and they get sinister, dark feelings from this propaganda. This is what upholds things as they are. the billions of dollars to go towards building military bases surrounding China, Vietnam, Laos, and Korea, with jets, bases, ships, and bombs, is partially able to continue, specifically because people hear the name China and they get sinister, dark feelings from this propaganda. This is what upholds things as they are. I get really bothered when people make completely unprincipled attacks on China. And this is why. Those people are in the empire. Those people are overlooking the development of their empire. They aren't looking at the material conditions of their development of that empire. They aren't looking at the material conditions of China. With the Marxist frame, we look at what preceded a place. We look at the development. We look at the history. Because a nation and a place and a region, all of it proceeded along a specific path of development. With empire, it developed from slavery, it developed from genocide, it developed from theft. With Canada, with Israel, with the US, with Australia, with Britain, these places became rich from genocide and theft. And what continues to let these nations thrive, what continues to let these nations develop, is the expropriation of the third world. Countries getting overthrown again and again, having their self-determination crushed. So when people are judging China, they are overlooking that their country is the one that is overthrowing countries for their benefit. There's been over 400 foreign interventions that the US has participated in the last 220 years. Over 400. So when we analyze China and the US, we must use the Marxist framework. We must analyze the history of what preceded the nation that we are examining and judging. The United States developed from slavery and expropriation of the third world and genocide and settler colonialism. China developed from feudalism. They developed using Marxist theory, and they have used that for 70 years. So that's why it is important for us to critically examine the direct material conditions of each nation. If we do not do that, we are denying the conditions that we are in and that they are in. This serves to uphold empire and uphold white supremacy. And the last thing worth mentioning is that Western people jumped to the claim about genocide camps in China because there is genocide camps in the US. And these people point elsewhere to hide the fact that they do not fight the actual genocide camps near them. These ICE camps have been around for years and years, and they've gotten worse and worse. This is one way that these people hide their cowardice. This tactic lets them feel better about not fighting the domestic issues here. This white supremacist function lets them claim that the supposed enemy is doing what they themselves are guilty of. And the very last thing that I'll mention is that Shein absolutely has its problems. Any corporation has its problems. But the way Shein is talked about is very, very specific for a specific reason that I have outlined here. And the intensity with which people examine and scrutinize and criticize Shein is the way that they should be criticizing our corporations, namely the bomb manufacturers and jet manufacturers here. So the intensity of the scrutiny that Shein receives should be significantly less than the corporations that we should be attacking primarily. We should primarily be attacking Lockheed Martin, Winthrop Gunman. Lockheed Martin in particular is the corporation who lobbied to keep NATO together. NATO was supposed to disband with the destruction of the Soviet Union, but Lockheed Martin kept it together so it could continue its racket of selling weapons to corporations of ruling classes. It was supposed to be dissolved in 1991. It had 12 countries that it sold to, and it continued to lobby, and now it has a total of 30 countries that it sells weapons to. The annual budget for NATO is over $1.2 trillion, and each year it continues to be driven upwards. All of this money is public tax money that goes directly to bomb corporations.